Okay, it is 1:30. I want to say good afternoon and welcome to everybody. This is Unlocking the Power of Diversity in Automotive. My name is Brian Bastin, and I'm the director of the Keiser University Automotive Dealership Management Program. It's my distinct pleasure to be here today with Dr. Aubrey Franklin, who's the director of the Graduate Psychology Program here at Keiser, and Erica Wells, who is with the Women of Color Automotive Network. And before I kind of get into what we're going to be talking about today, I want you to kind of imagine with me, later this year, we'll be taking a look at the 2021 Olympic Games in Japan. And one of my favorite events of all time is the 100-meter dash, the fastest man alive, the fastest woman alive, a mere nine and a half seconds of total victory. And I oftentimes imagine myself running in that race. I'm running against the best of all time, people like Jackie Joyner-Kersee and Usain Bolt. And every time I run that race, I happen to win. Now that's my world and that's my vision. But that's not the only place I've won. I've also won in the world of automotive. And I don't say that to be braggadocious. I say that because I've had a lot of help along the way. I've had a lot of great teammates along the way. And it didn't hurt to have my PhD. Now, by PhD, I'm not talking about the fancy college degree you can get here at Keiser. What I'm talking about is Papa had dealership. And during my time in the summers of my high school years and in my college years, I would work, and I worked really hard, and I did every single job imaginable in that dealership. There were some jobs that I swear to this day the department managers actually made up just so they can see how far they can kind of push the boss's kid. And while I didn't necessarily enjoy doing it at the time, it really gave me a distinct advantage. I got to learn the ins and outs of the business from the ground floor. I got to do everything. I got to witness what an employee can do and cannot do. I also had the very fortunate opportunity to have great schooling. I had a nuclear family that cared a lot about me. It was making sure that I was in the best schools, and I got that great education.
Hey, Marlo.
When I put this back into my metaphor about running the race, I basically started from the 40-meter mark. I had an advantage. Yes, don't get me wrong. I worked as hard.
I'm working deals, trying to eat lunch. Welcome.
Let me mute some people out here. If everybody can put their phones on or their screens on mute, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. But as I was running this race, I started at about the 40-meter mark, and I had that advantage. Now, some of you on this call today, you might also be with me. You might have had that little bit of advantage coming in. Others of you might have clawed your way into the race and are back on the starting blocks. But what this meeting is really for, it's for those people that are out there that can't even get an invite to the race. They're sitting outside the stadium looking for a way in, and they can't get into it. Now, diversity, equity, inclusion is something that's been talked about a lot, but we haven't had a whole lot of action with that. And what we see is the benefits of diversity are numerous. It increases the talent pool of workers. It brings in new creative ideas that are going to be out there. And it also increases to an increase in profitability for us as well. Despite this fact, it's amazing that only 23% of the automotive workforce is made up of women. And when we look at women of color, it's a mere 8% that actually makes up that total. And what this does is leads to a lot of confusion and frustration among women of color getting into the industry. And what we see is there's lots of obstacles in the way. And some of those obstacles are unconscious bias, worse yet, conscious bias, lack of knowledge and skill set that's out there, lack of mentorship availability and willingness, and also the fact that there's that lack of opportunity, that very opportunity that I had. And these statistics are never going to change unless the system changes as well. Automotive managers need to realize that they need to be able to attract, they need to be able to select, and then obviously retain these women of color that are out there that can add so much to our dealerships. The calamitous events of 2020 have provided a little bit of a ray of hope. There's a new dialogue. There's a new sense of being able to go out there for action. And what we have on this call today with us is we have a diverse group. We have some people that for diversity and inclusion means everything to them. We have other people that saw these events and what they want to do is they want to be part of the solution, but may not know how to be part of the solution. And then we have some people out there that want to use this as an opportunity to make more profit and be more profitable. This lecture will have something for all of you that are out there. And if dealerships want to remain viable in the future, they must reflect how their communities look, how their communities feel. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to introduce Miss Erica Wells with the Women of Color Automotive Network. Erica.
Hello, everyone. I am super excited on behalf of WOCAN, which stands for Women of Color Automotive Network. There's 4 founders, and they are on the call here with us today. We have Carrie Wise, who is Vice President of TrueCar. She's also the president of WOCAN. We have Patrice. Patrice Banks is the founder of Girls Auto Clinic, which is in Philadelphia. Girls Auto Clinic is an all-female car garage where you can get your hair done and your nails done while lady technicians work on your car. We also have Amanda Gordon. Amanda Gordon is an amazing person. She is the founder of Gojo Auto, and she is the first African-American woman to own a dealership in Colorado. And then myself, I am a sales manager here in Atlanta, Georgia, and we are the founders of WOCAN. To Brian's point, that ray of hope this summer, we decided to start WOCAN because we realized as women of color in automotive that it was hard for us to speak out. And we were in a position where in our industry, we were the only one. And we would have these phone conversations where we would talk to each other. And, you know, we had those days when we just wondered, how did I get in this business, right? And in those conversations, we realized that the struggles and the challenges that we were having were common. It was a common thread. And though each one of us are in literally 4 different coasts of the United States, we found there was so much similarity and synergy. And we wondered, why can't I find other women in my community that are here? And we decided to kind of form this bond and this relationship that turned into the nonprofit of WOCAN, and which it is today. And it kind of just blew up. And we got automotive news and auto remarketing to cover us. We were on CBT. All of a sudden, the conversation of diversity and inclusion in automotive started to make sense. And more people wanted to know, how do we attract more women in this business? And even as women in this business, we didn't have all the answers. But what we knew was we needed to do something, and that's where WOCAN got started. We have come together. We have over 400 members, which is absolutely incredible. We have, 10% of those which are allies, which are not women of color, but people who have said, listen, I want to be there. I want to support you guys. I want to know that what I can do to be a part of this community and raise awareness and create cultures within dealerships where women want to work, where minorities want to work. So we're super excited about that. We've done so much. We have speaker series every month. We do call to actions where we have member meetups where women can meet other women in automotive industry, where they can connect and create relationships. And then our most important, what we're super excited is the educational workshops and scholarships. And we're very pleased to be able to partner with Keiser for a very big scholarship opportunity. We're so excited about that. There will be more details coming soon. This is the first time we've announced it here on this platform. So we're excited about that partner. We also have some other wonderful sponsors, which is TrueCar, Subaru, Car Global, as well as other small partnerships that we've had to be able to create. So between our sponsors, between our allies, between our 400 members, we're super excited about the opportunities of diversity and inclusion in the automotive industry to bring more women into this. And we are so excited to partner with Keiser and have this platform here where we're going to be able to do educational events like this to be able to answer some of the questions that we all want to know. So thank you so much, Brian, for having us.
Thank you very much, Erica. Appreciate that. Before we get into our talk with Dr. Aubrey Franklin, Mayor Keith James of West Palm Beach was kind enough. He wanted to be here today, but unfortunately was not able to because of some other commitments, but he filmed a nice little clip for us. So I want to go ahead and share our clip here from Mayor James, and we thank him and his office for being able to do that for us.
Hello, I'm West Palm Beach Mayor Keith James with a special welcome to the attendees of Unlock the Power of Diversity and Inclusion in 3, 2, 1. This event is hosted by Keiser University's Automotive Dealership Management Program. Thank you to Brian Bastin and Dr. Aubrey Franklin for presenting, and an extra special thanks to the Women of Color Automotive Network for sponsoring and moderating this event. In the city of West Palm Beach, we are working toward a vision of our city as a community of opportunity for all, whereby anyone, regardless of their race or ethnicity, can realize their dreams in our city. Almost everyone has a dream. The dream of a good education, a great job, the purchase of a home, starting one's own business, perhaps an auto dealership, and so much more. However, while dreams are universal, we know that opportunity is not. Women, and particularly women of color, face many obstacles to entering the automotive industry. That's why diversity and inclusion in the automotive industry are so important. Recruiting women of color and minorities, clearing cultural obstacles and biases, and expanding the development of women of color and minorities is not only the right thing to do, but it also makes great business sense. Inclusive workplaces can lead to higher revenue growth, greater readiness to innovate, higher employee retention, and increased ability to recruit a diverse talent pool. The automotive industry is one of the world's greatest industrial and economic forces. 60 million cars and trucks are made every year. The industry employs a staggering 4 million people, and auto dealerships remain critical to the sale of vehicles, and because of the tax they contribute, the role that they play in their local communities and the jobs they create. 1.2 million people are employed at franchise automobile dealerships in the U.S. alone. Thank you for being a part of Unlock the Power of Diversity and Inclusion in 3, 2, 1. Enjoy today's program. Please know you are always welcome here in the great city of West Palm Beach.
We thank Mayor James for his kind words, and we look forward to further partnering with him. Before I get to Dr. Franklin, I do, as my students know, I like to throw up a little bit of a, to try to put a poll question up here. This is for some reason not loading. I'll try to get that back up. So without further ado, I do want to turn this presentation now over to Dr. Franklin, who is the director of our psychology graduate program here at Keiser University. So Dr. Franklin, we look forward to your presentation.
I like that. I grew up liking wrestling. Me and my father watched wrestling a lot, and I really enjoyed the tag team matchups. So that's what me and Mr. Brian Bastin just did. He tagged me in, and I'm ready to beat Andre the Giant, if you know a little bit about that. Thank you all so much for inviting me. I want to send a special thank you to Mr. Brian Bastin. I want to thank you, Ms. Wells, for doing all the wonderful work that I'm hearing you doing in the Atlanta area and beyond. I also want to thank Mayor Keith James for coming in, virtually and being able to be supportive immensely of this very important topic on diversity. Just to give you a little extra background about myself, I'm a clinical psychologist by trade. I not only specialize in stress, anxiety, and coping, but also I've worked extensively with the West Palm Beach and Palm Beach County School District with Dr. Deborah Robinson on exactly this topic of diversity and inclusion. In fact, I'm part of her Coalition for Black Student Achievement, where we have met and presented with all of Palm Beach County administrators and other faculty members on this great importance of diversity and inclusion. And it's a very sincere and dear topic to my heart as well, too, because my parents always instilled in all of us the understanding of diversity and inclusion, not just in the outer world, but also in our own family. There was 5 of us growing up, and I tell you right now, we didn't have it was diverse, even though we all shared 50% of each other's genes. We didn't come up exactly the same way. There was different things that we thought about, and there was different things that we were doing. But in those differences, we were able to come together so amazingly to the point where, obviously the proof is in the pudding. But as I talk about these two topics of diversity and inclusion, I want to just really emphasize the fact that diversity is not indifference. Diversity is difference, right? And I want to say that again, because I think that's a very freeing thought, is that diversity is not indifference, but it is difference. Indifference means, obviously, as you all know, the fact that things may not work together if mixed. But diversity is so amazing that the differences work to our advantage. So I always like to start with my students, you know, and when I'm in my classes, to explain to them the benefit, because, you know, psychologically speaking, when you know the benefit, you're more willing to act on it, right? So as we explore diversity, what diversity means, it's not just about the differences in the racial, ethnic, socioeconomic, geographic, or academic professional background, but it's all of these things included. So what you find is that diversity is less about the superficial elements of what makes us different, but it's more of the deeper inner man and inner person, interpersonal differences that included together will really bring out the best in all possible situations. So this is people with different opinions, backgrounds, degrees of social experience, religious beliefs, political beliefs, sexual orientations, heritage, and life experience. And truly, when you put all those things in there together, we're all different, right? We're all different. Even two identical twins have some level of difference to themselves as well. So when we see diversity, the way I want to kind of give us the takeaway of what diversity means is that diversity is the mix, right? Me and my family, we love this very awesome salad place that's near our house, right? And they give us all these toppings, you know, they give us options, you know, we can put corn in there, we can put broccoli in there, we can put everything in there. And let me tell you, the more ingredients you put in that bad boy, the better that salad's gonna taste, right? And the same thing happens when we deal with diversity as well. So I just really kind of want to illuminate to us the benefit of diversity, and also how diversity is nature. Diversity is general. This is everything that we're talking about when we're talking about diversity. I really like this quote by Carly Hodes, right? And if you can read it, it says this: people often relate diversity to race and sometimes gender, and more recently to sexual orientation. I think this is a pretty narrow view of what diversity means. It can also be ways of thinking and your intellectual background and training. So I think we miss the bar, so to speak, when we're thinking solely about race, gender, ethnicity when it comes to diversity. It's everything. It's everything. You know how most people, when they ask you a question like, what does this mean to you? It means everything. And diversity, in fact, means that exact same thing. So now I move from diversity to inclusion, right? Usually these two are grouped together when in fact they're two separate entities to the whole, right? So let's see what inclusion is. Inclusion involves bringing together and harnessing that strength of togetherness to diverse forces and resources in a way that's beneficial to everyone, right? So what inclusion does is it brings the concept and practice of diversity into action, right? I know Mr. Bastin was saying earlier that we talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, but what are we actually doing? What are the deliverables, so to speak, that inclusion can give to us? So this idea of concept meeting practice to create action, it happens through creating the environment. Right. You know, my father, he grew up on a farm. You know, not a lot of people grow up on farms anymore. But when he would talk about growing up on the farm, what he mentioned first was the kinds of crops he grew. And they weren't just one. He had the strawberries, he had the corn, he had the sweet potatoes, he had all this other stuff, you know. And the more crops, the more diverse the crops, the more beneficial it was to the farmer. Same thing happens with inclusion. Now we can, and I want us to expand on this because remember I said earlier, diversity is the mix. Well, if diversity is the mix, then inclusion has to be deliberate in order for that to happen. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, they're separate entities to the general whole of everything that we're going to be talking about. Now let's cross-reference into the importance of both diversity and inclusion. Diversity awareness, right? Now that you know and have the knowledge of what diversity is, we're now aware of diversity. So this is going to enable us to do a lot of different things. And this is not just in the automotive industry, this is everywhere. It's going to enable individuals and companies to hire, retain, and what I find more psychologically beneficial is to motivate and keep individuals motivated to be the best that they could possibly be and to get the best talent. If you want the best, you got to look for it everywhere, right? And if you limit yourself to looking at it in one particular area, then is it really the best? And the answer, of course, is no. So you have to look everywhere in order to find the best, right? Every time we hear a story about people, and I found the one, right? It's because they searched, and they search particularly everywhere, right? So this diversity awareness will help us do two things. Not only maximize your organization's performance, but also maximize each individual employee's level of performance. Now, that's diversity awareness. Inclusion awareness, so to speak, means that everyone goes deliberately and goes and makes it their mission to make people feel respected, listened to, and now everyone wants to contribute to their fullest potential, right? You want the buy-in, and the only way to get the buy-in is that you have to invest, and inclusion more or less gives you that investment. Dealership performance in particular increases when employees have more positive attitudes towards diversity. So if you find that your particular organization is not reaching their full performance level, check the positive attitudes toward diversity when it comes to your organization. Now, I've kind of been giving you the hints that there is a difference between diversity and inclusion. And I want to sum it up in one, nice phrase. Diversity does not exist without inclusion, right? It's like if you just stick with diversity, you're only going half the way. You have to go fully the whole way, and the only way to do that is to include, right? And I have another cool phrase that helps us understand the difference between diversity and inclusion. Diversity is like being invited to the party, right? I'll say that again because I think it's very important. Diversity is like being invited to the party. Now, inclusion is like being asked to dance, right? Most of us have gone to prom or experienced some level of prom or something of that nature. Maybe it was 20 years ago, maybe it was 10 years ago, however long ago it was. I think we can empathize with that understanding that when you go to a wedding or what have you, it's usually by invitation only, right? So you want to be invited. Diversity just gets you to the table, but then that's not the whole scope of it all. What we have to also realize is that you have to be asked. It's deliberate once again. So diversity is what you have. Inclusion is what you do. That's another, I repeat myself a lot because I think it helps. Diversity is what you have, right? We have diversity. We wear diversity on our beings at all particular points in time. Now, inclusion is what we do with it. And I truly believe that this is what this presentation and what this workshop is all about, is turning behavior into action, full action altogether. Now, whenever you're preparing for new territory, you got to scope it out, right? Usually when you go to college, before you go to college, your parents take you to college and they show you around, and it's like an orientation or things of that nature. And the purpose of the orientation is for you to be prepared for what may hinder you from success. And that's why I've included this great key topic of the 4 human biases that create barriers, not just to workplace diversity and inclusion, but to all levels of employment, occupation, what have you, right? And we're probably familiar with these 4 human biases, but I'm going to go through each one, and I'm going to kind of give an example of them as well too, just so we can understand how to avoid these. And we have to be intentional when when we see these and realize that we got to go the other way, right? You know, if you've ever walked down the hallway and you see somebody that you don't want to talk to, you turn around and you go the other way. So the same thing happens with these 4 human biases. We can't talk to them, right? So there are stereotypes, prejudices. This is a very awesome one too that I really am glad that we're talking about in this presentation. The perception of possible personal loss, and then ignorance. So let's go through each one. When it comes to stereotypes, that's, well, I think we've heard of stereotypes growing up, but this is this definition: believing that everyone in a particular group, and I mean everyone, like not a single person, and you're surprised when you see the opposite, believing that everyone in a particular group shares certain characteristics or abilities and will behave in exactly the same way, right? You know, in my family, there's the Franklins, and then there's the Samuels, and then there's the yada yada, right? And even in our own family, we have to avoid these barriers of stereotypes because we think everybody in this family is going to react the same way when that may not happen. And the stereotype or stereotypical thinking limits our scope on what we can achieve. So when we're looking at stereotypes, we have to do our best and our utmost best to avoid them. And the first way is to be aware that stereotypes do occur and then go the other way. Now, when it comes to prejudice, I have it simply stated here as outright bigotry, but let me explore on helping us understand what prejudice is. Prejudice, and I love this terminology that this particular individual used on defining prejudice: unjustified or incorrect attitudes, usually negative, toward an individual based solely on their membership in a social group. So usually when you're thinking of prejudice, it's going to be a negative assumption, right? Or a limiting assumption. It's unjustified in the fact that just because you're part of a particular group doesn't mean that you're going to react that particular way. And also, if that's been your only experience, doesn't mean that that's been everybody's experience. So prejudice is another human bias that we have to, walk the other way with, and be aware of it as well too, in case we find ourselves in that particular situation. Like I said earlier, this one is a real big one. Perception of possible personal loss, right? They took our jobs, right? That makes no sense. If it was your job and it really was your job, then nobody could take it from you, right? So this is that element of the flawed perception that if I increase my diversity, then somehow I'm going to lose out. Believing that one will lose out of employment opportunities because there's more diverse people, when in fact it's quite the opposite. It's quite the opposite, right? And as being a clinical psychologist, the thing about anxiety, the thing about stress, or anything of that nature, is that we tend to steer away when we need to be steering toward it. Right. And I think the perception of possible personal loss is that steering away fallacy that we as human beings tend to have, because we think if more means less for me. Right. When in fact, more has always meant more. Right. 2 times 2 is 4, not 1. Right. So even math realizes that when you multiply and when you add more to it, then it gives people more of an opportunity, not less of an opportunity. And there's never a possibility of losing out when you're understanding how important diversity is. And then the last one, which I would say, if I had a rank order of which one is the worst, or which one's kind of creates the trickle down effect of all the others, it's this one right here: ignorance, right? Being unaware of all the requirements of anything, but in this particular case of employment law. Ignorance leads to stereotypes. Ignorance leads to prejudice. And ignorance leads to the perception of personal loss. So if you're trying to figure out which one should I be looking out for the most, is this one right here: ignorance. Being unaware is okay, but you can't stay there. Ignorance is a stationary element that if you aren't careful, you'll always stay there, and it's going to continually limit your scope of all different types of events and experiences and what have you. So just to recap, 4 different human biases that really create barriers to workplace diversity and inclusion. I would say ignorance is the first one that we have to watch out the most, then stereotypes, then prejudices, and then this element that kind of sounds very, not so detrimental or hurtful, but it's one of those big ones, the perception of possible personal loss. Right. So that's what I have for you guys. I know we're going to have a Q&A later on, and so I could expand on all these other things. But I thank you guys so much for listening, for taking your time out to find this important, and Godspeed.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Franklin, on that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take over the presentation and talk a little bit about attracting of women of color, specifically, removing the barriers that are there from a cultural perspective, and then being able to expand the development of women of color in automotive. So when we talk about attraction, I'm going to look at a couple things and give you some data here. Number one is the employment picture today. Second is the actual recruitment process. Third are the excuses. I call it the yeah, but syndrome. And we see this too many times in automotive. And then the benefits of having that diverse workforce that's out there. And I always like to give my audiences or my students certain takeaways. So one of the takeaways I'm going to be looking to give you is new ways to write those job placement ads, ways that are going to attract not only more women of color, but probably what you'll see more people that are outside the industry that are going to give us a new, fresh approach with that. So the first slide I have here for you is a little bit of an eyesore chart here, but this comes from the Federal Reserve of St. Louis. And this is the workforce participation rate of African-American females in the United States. And what you can see here is that it's hovering right now about 60%. So essentially what that means is, for this particular chart, all African-American females over the age of 20, there's only 60% that are in the actual workforce. That leaves a big amount that are outside the workforce for whatever reason, whether it's they're in school, whether they've given up looking for jobs, whether they have to take care of children. Now, this number is gone down for all races and all segments of the United States workforce, but it's particularly hard hit among African-American female workers. The next one is the actual unemployment rate. And these numbers just came out. Currently, it stands at 8.6% for African-American females. That compares to a 6% overall unemployment rate in the United States as of the jobs report that just came out this past Friday, and a much lower percent actually for white males. So there's a lot of room to improve here, and there's a lot of opportunity. Dealers are looking for employees, whether those employees are in the sales area, whether it's in the accounting, marketing. Technicians is an untapped area. Technicians is kind of a special place for me. We're going to need 250,000 technicians over the next 7 years to either replace a need or replace people that are actually retiring from the industry. Recently, I had a post that I put on LinkedIn that there's a 30% unemployment rate among women that come out of the armed services. A lot of these women have special skills in computer technology that we really need in that area. This is such an untapped area if we only really know where to look and where to find these people. And that really starts with our recruitment process. And the recruitment process is try to get a reasonable amount of qualified candidates to apply for our job openings. Now, this recruitment process is a timely process and it's a costly process. I know from my time in the dealership, what'll happen is someone will quit, you'll have to fire somebody, and then it's this mad rush to find someone. And what you end up doing is you end up just hiring the same old retreads time and time again, rather than bringing in that fresh blood, rather than bringing in people with new ideas, rather than bringing in a new diverse workforce. And sometimes it could be, as Dr. Franklin was talking, from those prejudices and stereotypes that are out there. Other times it is we're just so busy doing the stuff of the job, we just want to hire that person and kind of move on with that. But that's not what we really need to do. We need to find those places where we can find qualified candidates. And how do we attract more women of color? Number one is rethink your job placement ads. I'm going to show you an example of a poorly written job placement ad in a moment, and a example of one that comes from Planet Subaru, give credit where credit's due, on how to properly write this placement ad. And it's not just for women of color. You may find that it actually works for a large segment of people. Next up is a picture paints 1,000 words. When a prospective candidate, or even if a customer goes onto your website, what do they see? Do they see a bunch of homogeneous people out there, or do they see that diversity that we talk about? It's one thing to talk about the diversity, but do we actually show that in our marketing messages, in our advertisements, on our meet our staff section of our websites? What do we see? What do our customers see? And what do those potential candidates see as well? Expect underrepresented groups or women candidates to be interviewed. I kind of got this from the Rooney Rule in the NFL. I'm big on my sports analogies, so this is the second of my 3 sports analogies that I'll give you today. But while I think the Rooney Rule's done some good things, I think that's had some problems with it as well. But if we want to hire more women of color, it really starts by being able to give them that interview process. It's about those opportunities that are out there. And in some cases, the interview process may just be a formality. Well, we're doing this to kind of check off a box. And that's the worst case scenario with it. But even then, we're given these underrepresented classes a little bit of a chance to develop certain skills, to learn what works in an interview, what doesn't work in an interview. So when they get that next shot, maybe that's the shot that they actually need that's going to get them that job. Next up is ask your employees. Our employees, especially the diverse employees we have, they know what works in our organizations. They know what doesn't work in our organizations. They might have a wealth of knowledge in terms of where we should be looking for these candidates out there. Don't forget to ask your employees. And then finally, I call it repair the missing rung. A lot of times we might get some women of color and some diversity into those early entry positions. But what we're missing is we're missing that mid-tier management level that has that diversity built in, or that upper level management that has it in. So there's that rung missing in that corporate ladder that we're trying to climb. So we need to make an active representation. We need to go out there actively soliciting for those positions. So yes, it's good to hire from within sometimes, and I like doing that, but sometimes bringing in that fresh perspective and bringing in some of these candidates for that mid-level range of management or upper level management can really help with that. So I want to show you some examples here of a couple of these job descriptions. And let's start with this one here. So this is, and I hid the name of the company. This was actually a real ad. I did not alter this in any way. So where you see the bold, that's actually was bolded in the ad itself. So I'm going to protect the guilty here, and I'll just call it XYZ Motors. And a couple things under job requirements. Must be willing to submit to a pre-employment background check, DMV screen, drug screen. All right, some of that stuff may be necessary. I did some of that stuff in my dealership as well, but that's the first thing we see here. I mean, what's going through your mind right now, whether you're a person of color, whether you're not a person of color, you're starting to think, okay, this is going to be maybe a little tyrannical place to work. At least 2 years of automotive experience is a must. I've found a lot of times finding people outside the industry are some of my best employees. Probably my 2 best employees one was in my sales department, one was in my service department. Both women came from outside the industry. The lady that came in my sales office, she formerly sold cell phones at a kiosk at a mall. She, within 6 months, became my top salesperson. And to this day, she's still the top salesperson at the dealership. Another girl came from, she was very young. She was about 18 years old, 19 years old at the time. She was kind of an assistant concierge at the Ritz-Carlton, came into our service department as a service greeter. Within a few short months, she became a service advisor. Didn't really know anything about automotive, but knew how to handle people, knew how to treat people with respect, and very, very polite. She became our top service advisor. So mandating it must be a must automotive experience, that's going to eliminate a lot of people. Now, what the studies kind of show is men will probably still apply for the job, but most females tend to not apply for the job unless they meet all the qualifications for the job, at least what's qualified on paper. And we see here 2 years experience, that's going to maybe eliminate a lot of people. Had I lived by that mantra, I would have missed out on a couple just unbelievably fantastic women that came in and changed my business for the better. And you can kind of see some of these other things that are out there. I kind of like this last one. Saturday, Sunday availability is needed, as well as some evening hours. So if I'm looking at this, I don't see work-life balance. I don't see a place that I want to work, and I'm going to probably pass on that. Next up, again, this comes from Planet Subaru. They call themselves the undealership. Again, I didn't alter this in any way. As you see, it is how it appeared in the job placement ad. And you kind of see right there in the middle in big bold, women and others traditionally left out of the car business urged to apply. Unlike the other one where I'm given a set of restrictions and kind of you must, here I'm urging you to apply if you have no prior experience. I live by the word PASS. PASS is another acronym I like. PASS is passion, attitude, and skill set. And if I don't have them, and I don't have them in that order, I'm going to pass on that candidate. I can always teach people skills as long as they have a little bit of aptitude, but I can't teach passion. I can't teach attitude. Another thing that really stands out for me here in this placement ad, Planet's 20 women comprise over 30% of team with 5 managers, 6 women in sales, and many in service department, including the service manager, the majority of our advisors, and even 4 technicians. Technicians, which you rarely ever will see a female candidate, they have 4 of them. What I also like is it goes on, 10 are moms. We have a diverse team. Former backgrounds are enterprise rental car branch manager, Hollywood movie director. I'd like to meet that person. Cell phone salesperson, fitness instructor, art gallery owner, investment professional, and recent college grad. So what we can see here by this is I'm reading this. If I'm a woman of color and I'm young, I don't have any experience whatsoever, this is a place I might want to work. There are people here that are going to look like me, that go through the same struggles as me, that have been successful. I like the fact that it has some kind of work-life balance. You don't see 10 or moms. I'm not a mom, but I'm a single dad, so I understand how that works a little bit in the time constraints and what happens trying to raise kids. And that indicates a work-life balance. Even if you don't look at it from a diversity and inclusion perspective, the NEDA workforce study states that 80% of millennials that take jobs in the sales department at car dealerships end up leaving within 1 year. Now, you might say, well, maybe that's a millennial thing, but if you look at it from all industries, it's about 19%, 80%, 19%, big gap. So if you're not changing the way we're doing business, you're not going to be in a position to get any employees, much less some women of color coming in. So if you want to kind of find some people in some different areas, this is certainly a way to go, is jazzing up those job placement ads. Bear with me one moment. Next up I have here is what I call the yeah, but syndrome. I hear this all the time. I heard it from my managers. I hear it when I do some dealer consulting, and it's always, yeah, but. So yeah, but, she won't apply for the job. I believe in this diversity inclusion, but you know what? Yeah, but it didn't work out last time. Or yeah, but she's not going to stay. Or yeah, but doesn't have any dealership experience. And the way I look at it, that's not the fault of the candidate. That's the fault of the dealership. Why won't she apply? Well, maybe it's because we don't have an inclusive culture on our websites. Maybe we don't have an inclusive culture in those placement ads. Why didn't it work last time? Was it because we didn't provide training? We didn't provide development? We didn't provide mentoring or allyship or any of those things, which I'll be talking about shortly? Why don't they stay? A lot of it isn't necessarily to do with the industry itself. It's maybe how we structure pay plans, how we structure time off. The business world is changing today. I grew up in a situation where you worked bell to bell 24/7 and you are on a strict commission pay plan. That's not necessarily what works today. That's not necessarily in the best interest of our employees, and it's not really in the best interest of our customers either. And as far as doesn't have any dealership experience, a lot of it is people just need the opportunity. It goes back to that 100-meter dash that I was running. I was able to partially be successful because I had that opportunity. Other people don't necessarily have that opportunities, and that's what we're trying to do. Present those opportunities. There's lots of positions, there's lots of openings in our dealerships, and we need to end this yeah, but syndrome. And then, of course, the benefits we get from this diversity and inclusion, it increases the talent pool. Again, the goal of the recruitment process is to get a reasonable number of qualified candidates. I want as many qualified candidates as I can so I can pick those best ones. It's going to bring in new creativity and innovation into our stores. It's going to be better for customer relations. Even if a person of color or a Hispanic person comes in the dealership and doesn't deal with the same ethnicity that they're coming in, just the fact that they see that around them is going to reduce the fear and reduce the stress level. And it not only does that for our customers, but it does it for our employees as well. And from a business perspective, I treat it as you're doing good, but you're doing well at the same time with it. So it's going to lead to higher potential profitability and customer satisfaction. In fact, there was a study done by McKinsey Company that actually said that diverse and inclusive organizations earn 2.3 times more cash flow than non-diverse companies do, not just an automotive number, but in business as well. Next up, in terms of our ACE acronym, is we want to clear the cultural obstacles. And I kind of took this a little bit from somebody I kind of admired and respected, never knew the man, but his name is Jack Welch. And I've learned from my classes, sometimes I have to go back a little context because some of the younger people don't remember Jack Welch, but he was the CEO of General Electric. And he actually has the moniker of being the CEO of the 20th century. I mean, it's nice to be the CEO of the year or the decade, but of the 20th century is pretty impressive. And what he said is, he is the chief obstacle remover. He's going to remove those obstacles that are out there. So what we want to do is we want to clear those obstacles. And how we're going to do that is we're going to take a look at uncovering unconscious bias. It's going to be out there in our hiring process. We can establish and create sales paths for development of our employees. And I also like the utilization of what I call the stay interview. A lot of times we've heard of exit interviews and we talk about those, but I like the stay interview because it allows me to retain my employees. And we want to retain those women of color in our organizations. We don't want them leaving because, again, remember, we're trying to establish and replace that missing rung. We want to see that they get to those middle management levels and then those upper management levels. And then finally, everything's about measuring. Measure, measure, and measure again. And our takeaway here are going to be two. Number one is an implicit bias test that was done by Harvard University that only takes you about 10 minutes to do, but it really uncovers a lot of that unconscious bias that we may not really know we have. And then secondly, the career paths. So Dr. Franklin's already talked a little bit about this. A bias is any prejudice for or against a person or group of people. And those biases can be conscious, and those are really unacceptable in this day and age. We see that too often. We still see that in our society, and it's a shame that decades and even centuries have gone by and we still have that conscious bias. But that unconscious bias is maybe even a little bit more dangerous for the fact that we may not know it's there. Even in our conscious world, it might not be something we think that we're that type or we have those biases out there. So you can take this implicit assessment test. I've included the website here for you, and it takes a look at all kinds of different biases, whether it's on race, whether it's on religion, whether it's on someone's weight, whether it's on someone's sexual orientation. And I highly recommend taking it because we can't fix these unconscious biases unless we first are aware that they exist. So there's reasons that we might have them in there. And what we see with them is it's often incompatible with what our core beliefs are. But as I mentioned before, it's more prevalent when you're working with time constraints. We're all very busy in our automotive worlds that are out there. We have to hire people. When I'm going through that hiring process, I'm not managing deals. I'm not working with service customers. I'm not looking forward thinking. So we tend to slip back into that bad habit. And that bad habit is that unconscious bias. And it's the first thing that comes out. So again, we need to make sure we understand it's there. Next up is career paths. When I came into the industry, this was the career path. You came into the dealership, maybe you started as a salesperson or a service advisor or a technician, and maybe there was one place up for you and maybe that was it. but that's not the way it is today. There's all kinds of opportunities out there, especially in some of these large public groups like an AutoNation or Asbury, or even some of the large private retailers, or even an individual mom and pop store that's out there. And I like this. I know what I want does not mean I know how to get there. So just because I know where I want to go doesn't mean I know the steps to get there. So I like to set up career paths in my dealerships. And you can do this in the sales area. You can do it in accounting, service advisors, technicians. It really works well with. And what I do is I break it into 4 distinct areas. I have some kind of trainee, then like a junior sales consultant, and then senior sales consultant. And this takes a lot of the subjectivity out of the mix. For the trainee, for instance, there's going to be certain areas they're going to have to hit. So there's certain training they're going to have to do. Diversity training can certainly be part of that. There could be phone call training, internet training. All that's going to go into the mix. Then there's going to be following a senior salesperson around for a while. This builds in some of that mentoring that we're out there. They can learn the skills necessary to be successful. They may not even take any floor time at this particular point. And then once you've passed this particular area, usually a trainee's going to be about 6 months, then we'll move on to that junior sales consultant area. And then there's going to be certain parameters there. So for instance, so many phone calls made, so many appointments made, so many presentations, so many deliveries, etc. And this sets up a clear path. So when I come into the dealership, I want to know that there is a way for me to develop and a way for me to grow and move on. Also, as we set up these initial areas, we take some of that bell to bell type mentality and some of that commission mentality out of the mix by having it be more of a salary base. This is going to attract a lot more people, a lot more women of color, a lot more millennials, a lot more Gen Z into the mix, getting a large range of diversity into our organizations. And then they can see this growth pattern. As they move their way up, we should still have different methods. Even when we get to that senior salespeople, different things motivate people differently. And this may be a little bit controversial to an old school auto executive, but you're not going to remain in business long if you keep this old school approach. So even that senior salesperson could be some kind of salary with bonus structures, and you could set up a separate pay plan for those people that like a commission structure. You can offer both. You just don't switch back and forth depending on how well they did that month. But we have these different methods, and these career paths are really a great way to go. They get a taste of the industry, they can feel it, sense it, touch it, and then they move on to the next level. And these levels will then go into management ranks and then into upper management ranks as well. And then finally, we need some kind of diversity scorecard. If you don't measure things and you don't have metrics, you can't hold people accountable. It's nice to say, yes, I want diversity inclusion. You may even believe you want diversity inclusion, but how do you know if you're really getting it? So some things we can look at are employees trained on diversity inclusion? Does the demographic of our dealership mirror our community? This includes those key managerial roles, not just lower end roles that are out there. What do customers and suppliers say about our diversity efforts? Talk to your manufacturer, talk to certain customers, find out how we're doing. Does your brand image, what you're reflecting out there, is that diverse and inclusion? And there's other areas that you can touch on as well here, but holding key management, both middle and upper level management's pay plan and compensation levels to hitting these key areas will really help to make a difference. It's going to hold people accountable. If I want to see an improvement in my vehicle inventory system, I'm going to concentrate on it and I'm going to make sure that I compensate on that. I need to do the same thing with diversity and inclusion to make sure I have those scorecards and they're held accountable for their actions with that. Finally, our last of our acronym for ACE is expand the development of women of color in the automotive. So I want to set out the reality first, then I'm going to talk about mentoring and allyship, and then I want to finish with our last kind of takeaway for the day, the cost of turnover. And I've developed a turnover calculator that I really find interesting because a lot of times we'll get women of color into the dealership, but they won't stay. And we've laid out some of the reasons they don't stay. And I want to show how much that's really costing us to the bottom line. Now, the end of 2020, Deloitte did a study with Automotive News, and I found this kind of interesting here. And this is a perception versus kind of a reality take. And it looked at women and men and kind of what they believed. And what we see here is 64% of all men believed that the industry was moving in the proper direction when we were talking about diversity and inclusion, but only 39% of women actually said the same thing. Almost half, 45% of all women said that if they kind of knew now what they knew then, they wouldn't have even got into the industry. Nearly 2/3 of women cite lack of diversity as the number one reason they wouldn't consider the automotive industry. And here's a huge one. 91% of women believe the industry is biased toward men, where only 47% of men hold that same belief. Now, I'd question you to look at it this way. If your department managers thought one way, but all of your customers were saying something else, I guarantee you, you would be working to try to implement the changes that your customers really wanted to put out there. The same thing goes here for diversity and inclusion. We're not doing a very good job. This is an old school mentality. It is a very male dominated industry. And to be honest with you, I was one of the benefactors of that. And what we see is a lot of time women, when if they do get into managerial roles in dealerships, a lot of times it's because their mom or dad was the dealer. We need to organically build a better culture that's out there that really embraces this diversity, give people the opportunity to see what we can do. And what you're going to see is the people like Lori Berger, my sales person, or Mindy Holt, who was my service advisor. When we put people in place and we can actually see what they can do, it's going to benefit us as well. And like Dr. Franklin was said, sometimes it's that fear of loss. So, if they get a job, then I'm out of a job. Well, that's not necessarily the case. That's looking at it as a zero-sum game. As we continue to build and grow and put in more layers there, there's going to be room for everybody to prosper in this organization. Up next is my turnover calculator, and I really like this. I have an Excel version of this, and I have a website or an email address at the end of the presentation for you if anybody would like this. But what I like is you can tailor it to your specific needs of your specific store. So here, if you take an average dealership has about 75 employees. If you have an annual turnover percentage of 40%, that means 30 of your employees are going to leave a year. Next up, we're going to take a look at the different costs, and there's direct cost and indirect cost to hiring. I have direct costs such as running the ad. I might have to pay some kind of sign-on bonuses, onboarding costs and things. And then there's those indirect costs that we have. The work that's not getting done, the customers that aren't getting followed up, all of that go into the mix. And again, if you're not tracking it, you should be, but you can put your own numbers in. So in this particular example, we see the cost is $23,000. So the cost of turnover, if we take that 23,000 multiplied by our lost employees, that's $690,000 a year that our dealerships are losing. Remember, this is an average dealership that's out there. Even if we didn't do a better job with inventory management, even if we didn't do a better job of taking care of our customers in the service department or having that level of service at 90% in our parts department, if we didn't do a better job anywhere, but all we did is we implemented some of these steps to reduce our turnover. And in this case, if we reduce that turnover by 20%, we would see $138,000 go directly to our bottom lines. That is a massive amount of number for an average dealership. The little mom and pop dealership out there could put $138,000 back into play. That's where we need to go with this. And in addition to that, if we put these better people in with these new ideas, these new creative ways to do it, we open up this diversity, it's going to open up our customers, we're going to have happier employees, and we're probably going to end up doing a better job in inventory management, in CSI, in our service departments, in our level of service in our parts department as well. Last thing I want to kind of touch on is mentoring and allies. I was fortunate enough, like I said, to have a lot of benefits, but I also had a great mentor, and I really miss him. He passed away last year, not from COVID, but from some other reason. And he would tell me, "Hey, you're being that spoiled dealer brat," or I can't believe you actually did that," or "Did you think about this?" And he would teach me, and he taught me from the time I was in high school all the way up through my career, even my career now with that. And in mentorship, usually it's a higher level professional that's going to share his or her experiences with you. They help the mentee not only learn their current role, but prepares them for those future positions. And it's great to have those mentors. And when we set up those career paths that I mentioned, that's a great way to get this mentoring out there. But the other thing that we need is allies. And Erica kind of talked about this as well. And I've heard lots of different definition for allies, but I really like this particular quote from Nicole, who's the director of the diversity program at the Mayo Clinic. And she says, when a person of privilege works in solidarity and partnership with marginalized groups, people to help take down the systems, challenge the group's basic rights, equal access, and ability to thrive in society. This is what allyship is about. Having somebody that's going to help knock down these barriers, remove these obstacles. And it's not just going to be women that's out there. It's not going to just be people of color out there. It's not going to be some of these movements that we've seen. It's going to be white people, white males like me that have been privileged in the industry, trying to help bring that opportunity. And one of the basically not one of the sole mission that we have here at Keiser University for our automotive dealership management department is to provide the skills necessary for current and future automotive leaders to not only to run a successful automotive retail establishment, but to do so in a customer-centric and ethical way. And that's why we need the allies that are out there. Before we get into question and answers, I kind of want to finish on this quote from Arlen Hamilton. She is a business entrepreneur, and even if you're not sold on diversity and inclusion for your business, it gets down to this. If you haven't hired a team of people who are of color, female, and or LGBT to actively turn over every stone, to scope out every nook and cranny, to pop out every bush, to find every qualified underrepresented founder in this country, you're going to miss out on a lot of money when the rest of the investment world gets it. So I'm hoping that we're doing it for the right reasons. And again, we can do well by doing good. So thank you everybody for your participation today. If you kind of like some of the takeaways, I have my email address on here. If you'd like to learn more about WOCAN, I have their contact information on there as well. And I would like to open it up. We have a few minutes left for questions and answers if anybody has any.
Hey, I wanted to thank you from Park Vista. You know, like I said, I have kids at home, kids here. I'll talk to them about it. If I have any questions, though, I'll let you know because it's hard to me to do virtual and in person. But I want to thank all of you for that because number one is as a business teacher, it needs to be addressed. Number two is options need to be found. And number three is to understand that anybody, no matter who it is, has opportunities if they take advantage of them and they work hard and they strive forward and continue to strive forward. So I want to thank you guys, and I'll talk to them about it on Friday because it's a little hard today, and I'll let you know, Brian. But if you want any specific questions, or any of you do, if you want to email Brian what you want to, students, these are 9th through 12th graders. I'll be glad to ask them the questions. So if you want any input from it, okay.
Thank you very much, Mark. Again, Mark is with Park Vista High School, Go Cobras, and he has a large automotive magnet high school program. A lot of beside on the technical side of it, but they just opened up a business management segment for automotive as well. So thank you for all your help there, Mark. Any other questions from our group? I have a couple here in the chat box about how can I get a copy of the presentation. You can certainly email me. I'll put my email address here in the chat box. And some of you have put your information on here as well. And I will be happy to send you that information as well. Any other questions for either myself or for Dr. Franklin?
Brian, it's Dr. Rader.
Hi, Dr. Rader.
I just really want to commend you guys on what you've done here. It's just really well done and a lot of great information and tips and takeaways. So thank you.
Very welcome.
Hey, Brian, I don't see your email address in the chat for some reason.
Oh, okay. I just put it in there. If you want to put your email address in the chat,
I did.
I'll make sure that I get you a copy of the presentation slides.
Thank you
Brian,
so much.
I'll
Excellent
put yours
presentation.
in there.
Oh, okay, thank you. Actually, I did put it in this in the chat, but I left out a letter of my name. So we'll wait for Dr. Rader to put the information in the chat box. Okay, well, if there aren't any further questions, I do thank everybody for their participation today. I'm glad that you can come out here and take a look at it, and wish you great success in your endeavors that are out there. Have a great afternoon, and look forward to maybe presenting again sometime. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, good to see you, Carlos. Mercedes.
I see you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Good. Phone, I'll take a copy of these email addresses. I guess. I don't know if I'm gonna have access to that.
Yeah, it is fishy sometimes after you press record or finish recording.
Let me stop the recording.